Across the globe, a new wave of economic nationalism is rising, and it's being championed by some of the most unexpected figures in global politics today. From the heart of Africa to the power corridors of the United States, three leaders, Burkina Faso's Ibrahim Traoré, former US President Donald Trump, and a US auto union leader, are reshaping the way nations view their economic independence and global influence. Each of them, in their own way, is advocating for policies that prioritize national interests, defend local industries, and challenge the established order of global trade and economics. This convergence of figures from such different corners of the world raises important questions. Is this a short-term surge, or are we witnessing the birth of a new global economic order, one defined by national pride, protectionism, and self-sufficiency? Join us as we explore the forces behind this shift and ask whether these leaders are rewriting the playbook for economic power in the 21st century. Economic nationalism is gaining momentum globally, driven by influential figures such as Ibrahim Traoré, Donald Trump, and UAW President Shawn Fain. Each of these leaders brings a unique perspective, but they share a common objective: to protect their nation's economic interests in an increasingly competitive and unpredictable world. Ibrahim Traoré advocates for African sovereignty, urging nations to reclaim control over their resources and economies, to ensure wealth benefits the people rather than foreign powers. Similarly, Donald Trump's America First agenda focuses on protecting American workers by opposing outsourcing and imposing tariffs to prioritize national economic interests. Shawn Fain, president of the UAW, seeks to restore the power of American labor unions, arguing that globalization has undermined workers' rights and wages. These leaders represent the rise of nationalism, aiming to safeguard their nation's economic futures amidst global uncertainty and countering exploitation by multinational forces. Ibrahim Traoré, Africa's bold vision for sovereignty. Ibrahim Traoré, the current president of Burkina Faso, represents a new wave of African leaders who are determined to reclaim the continent's economic and political sovereignty. Since coming to power in a military coup in 2022, Traoré has positioned himself as a staunch advocate for economic nationalism, with a vision for Burkina Faso that emphasizes self-sufficiency and the protection of national resources from foreign exploitation. His policies reflect a broader desire across Africa to take control of its own destiny and reduce the influence of former colonial powers and multinational corporations. Central to Traoré's economic nationalism is the belief that Burkina Faso needs to regain control of its natural resources, particularly in the mining sector. Historically, Western powers and foreign companies have benefited from Africa's vast natural wealth, often at the expense of local communities and national economies. Traoré has been vocal in his criticism of these imbalances, particularly the role of France and other foreign entities in extracting Burkina Faso's resources with little benefit to its citizens. Under his leadership, Burkina Faso has sought to renegotiate mining contracts and demand more favorable terms for the country, ensuring that the wealth generated from these resources stays within the nation. A key component of Traoré's agenda is reducing the country's reliance on foreign aid, which he views as a form of dependency that limits Burkina Faso's sovereignty. Instead, he advocates for the development of homegrown industries that can create jobs, stimulate local economies, and reduce poverty. This includes investing in infrastructure, agriculture, and manufacturing, with the aim of building a more diversified economy that is less vulnerable to external shocks. Traoré's nationalist rhetoric and policies have struck a chord not only in Burkina Faso, but across Africa, where many countries are pushing back against the legacy of colonialism and the dominance of foreign powers. His approach reflects a growing sentiment on the continent that Africa must prioritize its own economic interests, take control of its resources, and negotiate fairer deals with foreign entities. By embracing economic nationalism, Traoré is sending a strong message to both African nations and the international community that the time for African countries to determine their own futures is now. In this era of shifting global power dynamics, Traoré's leadership symbolizes a broader movement toward economic independence in Africa. His efforts to reduce foreign influence and prioritize national sovereignty over global cooperation reflect the continent's desire to build an economic future that benefits its people and ensures the sustainable management of its resources for generations to come. Traoré's bold vision is not just about Burkina Faso, but is part of a larger trend of reclaiming economic power across Africa. Donald Trump, America First, again. Donald Trump's brand of economic nationalism, famously encapsulated by his America First slogan, became a hallmark of his presidency and continues to resonate widely across the U.S. His approach emphasized prioritizing American workers, industries, and national interests above global considerations. Central to Trump's economic vision was his trade war with China, which involved imposing tariffs on foreign goods in an effort to protect American manufacturing and address trade imbalances. He also sought to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S., aiming to reverse the trend of offshoring that had led to the decline of American industry in favor of cheaper foreign labor. Trump's commitment to reshoring jobs stemmed from his belief that decades of globalist policies had hollowed out U.S. industries, leaving the American working class at a disadvantage. He argued that past trade agreements, such as NAFTA, had been unfair to the U.S., and that the country needed a more aggressive approach to protecting domestic jobs. His administration negotiated better trade deals, such as the USMCA, United States-Mexico-Canada Agreement, cut corporate taxes, and incentivized businesses to bring manufacturing back to U.S. shores. These policies helped foster a period of strong economic growth before the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted the global economy. His tax cuts, particularly for corporations, were aimed at making the U.S. a more attractive place for investment, while his Made in America rhetoric reinforced the push for domestic production. Even after his presidency, Trump's influence on economic nationalism remains evident. The trade war with China marked a significant shift in U.S. foreign policy, where Trump openly challenged global economic norms. His protectionist stance extended beyond trade to issues like immigration and labor unions, advocating for policies that prioritized American workers over foreign competition. His rhetoric and policies resonated with millions of Americans who felt left behind by the forces of globalization and the rise of multinational corporations. Trump's economic nationalism wasn't solely about opposing foreign nations. It was also about challenging international institutions and economic systems that he believed had been designed to benefit elites at the expense of ordinary people. By positioning himself as a defender of American sovereignty and working-class interests, he mobilized a significant segment of the population who saw globalization as a threat to their livelihoods. His presidency, though contentious, brought these issues to the forefront of American politics, shaping debates about the role of the U.S. in the global economy and the future of international trade. Trump's economic nationalism has continued to influence both mainstream politics and grassroots movements in the U.S. His call for economic sovereignty, protectionism, and a focus on American-made goods remains a powerful and divisive force, impacting the way many Americans view the country's role in the world economy. Shawn Fain, the new face of labor power in America. Shawn Fain, the newly elected president of the United Auto Workers UAW, has quickly emerged as a key advocate for economic nationalism in the United States. Although his platform may seem primarily focused on workers' rights, his policies and rhetoric are steeped in a broader nationalist agenda, one that prioritizes American labor and challenges the global economic order that has often disadvantaged U.S. workers. Fain's leadership reflects a pushback against the long-standing trend of outsourcing, particularly in industries like automotive manufacturing. For decades, the American middle class, especially in the industrial heartland, has suffered as companies shifted production overseas to take advantage of cheaper labor. Fain's stance on economic nationalism is most clearly seen in his efforts to challenge this trend, advocating for policies that ensure American workers remain central to the economy. At the core of Fain's agenda is the promotion of Made in America policies. He emphasizes the importance of American-made goods, particularly in the auto industry, and is vocal about the need for automakers to prioritize U.S. workers in their production processes. Fain's efforts aim to bring manufacturing jobs back to the U.S., creating better wages and working conditions for the American workforce. By confronting automakers about outsourcing and pushing for greater domestic production, Fain has revitalized the labor movement and raised awareness about the economic challenges facing workers in the auto industry. Under Fain's leadership, the UAW has become a more vocal advocate for economic nationalism. He has championed policies that protect American jobs, ensure stronger labor protections, and demand fair wages for those working in the auto industry. These efforts signal a new era for labor rights in the U.S., where the fight is not just for better conditions, but for the very survival of American jobs in the face of global competition. Fain's nationalist vision extends beyond just the auto sector. He is part of a larger movement that seeks to challenge the dominance of multinational corporations and calls for more government intervention to protect U.S. workers. His economic nationalism advocates for a shift in how the economy operates, pushing for a system where the working class is central rather than marginalized. This includes challenging the free market policies that have led to the decline of domestic manufacturing and the hollowing out of many American industries. Therefore, Shawn Fain's rise to leadership at the UAW represents a pivotal moment in the ongoing debate over economic nationalism in the U.S. His efforts to prioritize American workers and protect domestic manufacturing industries are helping to redefine labor movements, placing the needs of the American worker at the forefront of the national conversation. Fain's leadership offers a bold vision of a future where American jobs and industry are not just protected but are revitalized for the benefit of the working class. Redrawing the global balance of power. What's clear from the rise of figures like Traoré, Trump, and Fain is that economic nationalism is reshaping the global balance of power. Countries and leaders are no longer willing to bow to global institutions and trade agreements that they feel only serve the interests of powerful elites and multinational corporations. In the U.S., the rise of economic nationalism signals a shift away from the free market orthodoxy that has dominated since the end of World War II. Whether through Trump's trade wars or Fain's fight for labor protections, the message is the same: American workers must come first. This shift in focus is altering the dynamics between the U.S. and its global competitors, particularly China, which has long been the beneficiary of free trade policies. Internationally, Traoré's push for African sovereignty is leading to a rethinking of Africa's role in the global economy. Historically, African countries have been pawns in the geopolitics of the West, often seen as suppliers of raw materials rather than centers of economic power. But with leaders like Traoré challenging the status quo, there's a new wave of Pan-Africanism that aims to change the continent's economic position. In fact, the intersection of these nationalist movements is highlighting the deepening divides between nations. The world's economic center is slowly shifting from the West to the East and the global South. As economic nationalism grows, there's an increasing sense that countries must look inward and prioritize their own citizens and industries over global cooperation and competition. Globalization versus economic nationalism, the key tension. Globalization has long been a driving force behind global economic growth, fostering interconnectedness and interdependence among nations. The integration of markets, the flow of goods and services, and the expansion of technology have allowed for lower costs for consumers and new opportunities for businesses. However, the benefits of globalization are increasingly being questioned, particularly as economic nationalism gains momentum across the world. Nationalist movements argue that globalization has deepened inequalities and eroded national sovereignty, creating a system that disproportionately benefits corporations and wealthy elites while leaving many behind. Economic nationalism, as championed by figures like Traoré, Trump, and Fain, presents a challenge to the globalized economic order. For Traoré, the focus is on reclaiming African sovereignty. He argues that the continent's vast natural resources should be utilized for the benefit of African people, not exploited by foreign powers. Economic nationalism in this context is about ensuring that African nations regain control over their economies, build domestic industries, and prioritize the welfare of their citizens. For former US President Donald Trump, economic nationalism is about putting American workers first. Trump's policies sought to reverse the outsourcing of jobs and bring back manufacturing to the US, viewing global trade as a threat to American industry and employment. His America First agenda aimed to protect American interests by imposing tariffs and renegotiating trade deals to ensure that American workers were not sidelined in the pursuit of global profits. Similarly, union leader Shawn Fain advocates for a resurgence of power for American labor unions. He argues that globalization has weakened workers' rights and pushed down wages, leaving unions and their members at a disadvantage. Economic nationalism for Fain is a response to the growing power of multinational corporations and aims to restore the bargaining power of labor in the face of global economic pressures. A new world order in the making. The rise of economic nationalism, as exemplified by Ibrahim Traoré, Donald Trump, and Shawn Fain, is reshaping the global economic landscape. These figures are drawing clear lines in the sand, challenging the dominance of multinational corporations, and redefining what it means to put one's own country first. Whether in Africa, the US, or global trade negotiations, the echoes of their nationalistic agendas are being felt around the world. As economic nationalism continues to rise, the world will have to navigate a new reality, one where power dynamics are shifting, and the traditional models of globalization may no longer hold the same sway. The faces of economic nationalism are now defining the course of global power. How nations respond to these changing tides will determine the future of the global economy and the balance of power for decades to come. Each of these figures represents a different facet of the growing nationalist sentiment, whether it's a fight for economic sovereignty, protection of local industries, or the defense of workers' rights in an increasingly globalized world. But the implications of their actions are far-reaching, sparking debates on trade wars, labor rights, and national security. Will these leaders be able to build a new economic order that reshapes the global balance of power? Or will their nationalist agendas lead to increased isolation and conflict on the world stage? What do you think? Are we witnessing the dawn of a new global era, or are we simply seeing the rise of new tensions? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below.